I planned a party knowing it would end my marriage.
The idea for the gathering didn't start with anger. It came from a strange, unsettling calm that settled in the moment suspicion finally hardened into certainty. I went through my days pretending nothing had changed, but on the inside, everything had already collapsed. From the outside, the house still looked perfect. The lawn was trimmed, the driveway was clean, and polite waves were exchanged with neighbors. Inside, though, trust had already died quietly without a sound. I'd noticed the changes long before I was willing to admit them to myself. The phone that never left their side, the smiles that arrived late at night after a text, the excuses that were polished so smooth by repetition they gleamed. At first, I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was imagining things. Love has a funny way of defending itself against the truth, even when it's staring you right in the face. Then came the moment that erased all doubt. It wasn't a dramatic discovery. It was a glance that lingered too long between two people who should have been looking at each other that way, a touch that didn't belong, a shared silence that spoke louder than any words ever could. In that instant, I knew. I didn't confront them. Shock gave way to a sharp, cold focus. I learned very quickly that anger just clouds your judgment, but patience sharpens it. If this truth was going to come out, it needed the clear light of day, not the chaos of a shouting match. The invitation list was easy to write. Neighbors, friends, all the familiar faces from our shared life. And of course, two people who had absolutely no idea what was waiting for them. Planning the event felt surreal, like I was setting a stage for a play where the main actors didn't even know they were in it. Every little detail mattered, from the food to the music. In the days leading up to it, I watched them closely. I saw the nervous energy, the forced cheerfulness, the misplaced confidence. Guilt has its own rhythm, you see, and once you know how to listen for it, you can hear it everywhere. The day of the party arrived bright and warm, the kind of perfect summer afternoon made for celebration. Smoke curled from the grill, music drifted through the air, and laughter filled the yard. I played my role perfectly. I smiled, I greeted guests, I refilled drinks. On the surface, absolutely nothing was wrong. And then the final guests arrived. For just a second, it felt like time froze. I saw a flicker of recognition flash across their faces, a wave of panic barely contained behind polite smiles. That single split-second look told me everything I still needed to know. I welcomed them both warmly, a little louder than necessary, just enough to draw a few eyes without giving anything away. Courtesy can be a powerful weapon when you use it carefully. The afternoon stretched on, and the tension in the air grew thick and invisible. Stolen glances started to replace conversations. Forced, awkward distance replaced comfortable closeness. I watched as hands brushed accidentally on purpose. I watched as fear began to creep into the spaces where confidence once lived, but nobody else seemed to notice. They were too busy enjoying the food and the sunshine. Their ignorance just made the contrast sharper. I waited. The truth requires perfect timing. When the moment finally came, it arrived quietly. There was no shouting, no drama. Just me raising my glass for a toast. A pause, a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I began to speak, calmly, choosing every word with surgical precision. And with every sentence I uttered, I peeled back another layer of the illusion we had all been living in. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. It was deafening. Shock settled over the crowd like a thick fog. Denial tried to surface in their eyes, but it collapsed under the weight of exposure. Some truths are just impossible to outrun. As people started to put the pieces together, confusion on the faces of my friends and neighbors turned into dawning realization, faces drained of color. One voice cracked trying to speak, another trembled into silence. The full weight of consequence arrived all at once, right there on my perfectly manicured lawn. I didn't shout. I didn't insult them. The facts did all the heavy lifting for me. Truth doesn't need any decoration. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, torn between morbid fascination and empathy for me, but nobody intervened. The collapse happened slowly, then all at once. Years of secrets and lies unraveled in just a few minutes. Tears followed, then pleading whispers, then a quiet, self-directed anger. No one there was left untouched. When people began to leave, they did so quietly. The party just sort of dissolved without any real sense of closure. What remained was wreckage. Emotional debris was scattered all across a once perfect yard. The conversations that followed in the next few days were brief and hollow. Excuses and explanations felt meaningless. I stood my ground without ever raising my voice. Boundaries formed naturally once the trust was gone. The house emptied out faster than I expected. And silence returned, but this time it was heavier and more honest. That night I slept poorly, but for the first time in a long time I slept without confusion. Clarity hurts, but it hurts a lot less than uncertainty. The next morning arrived with all the consequences lined up neatly. Lawyers replaced arguments. Hard details replaced denial. Cold, hard structure replaced messy emotions. A reputation, I learned, can shift overnight. Appearances proved to be so incredibly fragile. I focused only on what mattered, protecting what could still be preserved from the fallout. Everything else became irrelevant noise. Support came from the most unexpected places. And judgment, well, that came from the most predictable ones. I learned very quickly who in my life valued truth over comfort. And those were the only voices that mattered. My life shrank for a while. It became simpler and quieter. Peace returned, but unevenly in fits and starts. A new routine began to build itself, one without any performance. Stability felt different this time, more solid. I stopped explaining myself to people. The truth was enough. Occasionally, regret would surface uninvited. I learned to just let it pass. People often misunderstand what revenge is. It isn't about destruction, it's about exposure. It's about refusing to carry someone else's lie for them anymore. What shocked people most wasn't the confrontation itself. It was the restraint. I didn't win anything that day, but I did reclaim myself. The future didn't unfold dramatically, it unfolded honestly. I had to rebuild trust in myself before I could ever think about extending it to someone else again. Self-respect became my new foundation. I stopped measuring my worth by how things looked on the outside. Integrity mattered so much more. Eventually, the house started to feel like a home again. Not because it forgot what happened, but because it healed around the memory. Some connections were lost forever, but others grew stronger than I could have imagined. I accepted that not all endings are gentle, some are just necessary. That gathering became something of a neighborhood legend, whispered about quietly at other barbecues. But for me, it was closure. I didn't celebrate the fallout, I just accepted it. And standing alone no longer frightened me. In fact, it steadied me. The person I became afterward was quieter, clearer, and completely unafraid of the truth. That person felt real. The story didn't end with some grand reconciliation or a dramatic punishment. It just ended with clarity. Loss became my new direction. Pain became my new perspective. And in choosing honesty over silence, I rebuilt a life that was no longer shaped by betrayal, but by the quiet strength it revealed within me. Thank you for listening.